Camp Whispering Pines. The bus rattled down the cracked country road, dust swirling in the late July air. The children's laughter echoed off the windows, mixing with the rhythmic hum of the tires. Somewhere between excitement and fear, Camp Whispering Pines loomed at the end of the road like a faded postcard from the past. Wooden cabins, a creaking pier over a dark lake, and a sign that leaned slightly, its paint peeling to reveal older letters underneath. It was 1986, and for many of the kids from Lincoln Middle School, this was their first summer away from home. No phones, no TVs, just forest, water, and whispered legends. At the front of the bus sat Mrs. Callahan, the head counselor. Tall, with iron gray hair and a whistle around her neck. Next to her was Mr. Avery, the camp director, whose smile never quite reached his eyes. The bus groaned to a stop. "All right, campers! Everyone out!" Mrs. Callahan called. Children spilled into the sunlight. The forest towered around them. Endless pine trees that seemed to whisper in the wind, the kind of sound that was almost words if you listened long enough. Arrival among the group was Tommy Hale, 12 years old, thin, pale, and shy. He stuck close to his friend Eddie Barnes, who was the opposite, loud, curious, always daring others to sneak out after lights out. They were assigned to Cabin 3, along with 3 other boys, Mark, Billy, and Dean. The cabin smelled of old wood and lake water. Cobwebs hung in the corners. On the first night, as the boys unpacked, Tommy noticed strange marks carved into the wooden floor. Small circles and lines, almost like symbols. "What do you think that is?" Tommy asked. Eddie grinned. "Probably some older kids messing around." But later, when the lights went out and the forest grew quiet, Tommy heard it, soft whispering outside, like voices carried by the wind. He thought it was the trees at first, until one of the whispers seemed to say his name. The legend. The next morning, the campers gathered in the mess hall, where a faded banner read, "Welcome back, campers!" While they ate watery oatmeal, Mr. Avery stood up and gave his usual speech, safety rules, cabin chores, buddy system. But when he mentioned the lake, his tone changed. "No one," he said firmly, "is allowed to swim past the pier. The water gets deep quickly, and the currents are unpredictable." A few of the older counselors exchanged glances. That afternoon, during arts and crafts, Eddie started whispering about a story he'd overheard. Mark said this camp used to be called Camp Hollow Pines. Closed down in the 60s. Something about a kid who drowned. Tommy frowned. "Why'd they change the name?" Eddie shrugged. "You know how adults are. Pretend nothing bad ever happened." That night, thunder rolled over the lake. Rain lashed against the cabin. The boys told scary stories by flashlight, and when it was Tommy's turn, he hesitated, because part of him already felt like he was inside one. He thought of the voice whispering his name, of the strange symbols on the floor, and of the lake, black and endless, beyond the pier. The first disappearance. By the third day, the rain had stopped, and the air was thick with humidity. Campers played games by the water, counselors blew whistles, and everything seemed normal again until Billy didn't show up for dinner. "Probably snuck off," Mrs. Callahan said, her jaw tight. "We'll find him." They searched until nightfall, around the cabins, the dining hall, the woods. The lake reflected the moon like glass. Mr. Avery told everyone to go to bed early, his voice shaking slightly. Tommy couldn't sleep. He kept staring at Billy's empty bunk. Sometime after midnight, the whispering started again. Closer this time, right outside the window. He sat up, heart hammering, and saw movement among the trees. Something pale, human-shaped. He woke Eddie, but when Eddie looked, it was gone. "Dude, you're freaking yourself out," Eddie muttered. But then they heard a splash. From the lake. Echoes beneath the water. The next morning, Billy was still missing. The counselors told the kids he must have gone home early, but nobody believed it. That day, they canceled swimming. The lake looked calm, but something about it felt wrong. Too still, too dark. The surface mirrored the sky perfectly, as if it were waiting. Tommy, Eddie, and Mark snuck to the pier during free time. The boards creaked under their sneakers. Look, Mark whispered, pointing at the water. Something floated near the pier. A pine cone. Then another. And another. They bobbed gently, forming a pattern, almost a circle. Tommy's skin prickled. The same as the carvings on our floor, he said softly. Eddie threw a stone into the center of the circle. The ripples spread, and for a second Tommy thought he saw a hand, pale, reaching up, before it disappeared beneath the surface. They ran back to the cabin and didn't talk about it again. That night, another bunk was empty. Mark's. The search panic spread quickly. Mr. Avery tried to keep order, saying Mark must have gone to the ranger station. But when a second child vanished, the laughter and games stopped. Parents were supposed to visit in 2 days. Until then, the gates stayed locked. Tommy and Eddie decided to search the woods themselves. They followed the faint trail leading from behind the cabins. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, just that strange whispering again. The path ended at an old stone well, half hidden by roots. The stones were covered in moss and carved with the same circular markings. Eddie leaned over the edge. "Hello?" His voice echoed back, distorted, like someone repeating it from far below. "Hello?" Tommy pulled him back. "Don't!" Something moved in the darkness at the bottom of the well, a flicker of pale light. They ran all the way back to camp. That night, Eddie disappeared. The whispers. Tommy was the only boy left in cabin 3. He sat alone on his bunk, staring at the empty beds. The forest was silent except for the faint rustle of the pines. He went to Mrs. Callahan's cabin, but she wasn't there. Her whistle hung on the hook by the door. He noticed muddy footprints on the floor leading out toward the lake. He followed them. At the shore, he saw her, standing ankle-deep in the water, staring at her reflection. "Mrs. Callahan?" he called. She didn't move. When he stepped closer, she slowly turned her head, eyes wide, as if listening to something only she could hear. "They're calling," she whispered. "Do you hear them too?" Before Tommy could answer, she stepped deeper into the lake, then deeper still, until the dark water swallowed her. He screamed for help, but no one came. The camp's secret. The next day, the remaining campers, maybe 15 in total, gathered in the dining hall. Mr. Avery's hands trembled as he tried to reassure them. "It's just bad weather and accidents," he said. "The bus will be here soon." But Tommy noticed something else. Behind Mr. Avery, nailed to the wall, was a framed black and white photo. A group of children smiling in front of the same cabins. At the bottom, in faded ink, it read, "Camp Hollow Pines, Summer, 1958. And among the smiling faces was Billy, and Mark, and Eddie. He couldn't breathe. He stumbled outside, clutching the photograph. Behind the mess hall, he found an old shed with broken windows. Inside were boxes filled with belongings, children's shoes, watches, name tags, each with a year written on it. The most recent one, 1986, the same year, the return. As night fell, fog rolled in from the lake. The last counselors gathered the children inside the hall, trying to keep them calm. Outside, voices whispered through the mist. Laughter, footsteps, the sound of splashing water. Tommy clutched the photo, his hands shaking. The door burst open, and Eddie stood there, soaking wet, pale, smiling. "Come on, Tommy," he said softly. "It's okay now. You just have to listen." His voice didn't sound quite right. Too hollow, too calm. Behind him, shapes moved in the fog. The other missing campers, faces pale, eyes dark. Mr. Avery shouted, but the lights flickered and died. The whispers grew louder, rising into a chorus that filled the hall. "Join us! Join us!" Tommy ran. Out the back door, through the trees, toward the pier. The mist was thick, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. He could hear footsteps behind him. Not chasing, just following. At the end of the pier, the lake was perfectly still again. And beneath the surface, faces waited. The final night. He turned back and saw the camp, cabins half hidden by fog, the faint glow of lanterns flickering. He could hear the others singing now, a campfire song, warped and slow. He dropped the photograph. It landed face up on the wood, the smiling children staring up at him. He whispered to himself, "I want to go home." And then the water whispered back, "Home." Something cold brushed his ankle. Then another touch. A hand pulling. He screamed, trying to break free, but the grip was strong. Impossibly strong. The mist thickened until he couldn't see the sky. The last thing he felt was the water closing over his head, the voices surrounding him, welcoming him. Epilogue. 2 weeks later, the bus returned to Camp Whispering Pines to collect the campers. It found the place empty. The cabin stood silent, doors open, beds made. The mess hall still smelled faintly of oatmeal. The sheriff found only one thing on the pier, a faded photograph, soaked but still visible. It showed a group of children smiling in front of the cabins. At the bottom, the caption had changed. Camp Whispering Pines, summer 1986. And in the front row, smiling faintly, was Tommy Hale. The end.